You may be seated. I'm excited today to share with you a report of what we saw. Marcy Long and Vicki and I were in El Salvador in the village of La Palma in the very northern part of the country of El Salvador. And so I'm excited to tell you about this because this is all going to be preliminary to an invitation today for this church to get involved in that work. We've got a missions group here that consists of Paul and Amy Johnson and Rick and Marcy Long and Vicki and myself, and we are open to anybody else that would like to be part of this group. We met last week and talked about La Palma and talked about our meeting with the elders and them giving us the green light to do medical missions trips in La Palma, and we're all really excited. And I appreciate the partnership that this missions group shares together. I'm especially grateful for Rick and Marcy for putting this slideshow together for me today. In Acts chapter 14, the Apostle Paul came back from his very first trip throughout the Roman world, and it says that they sailed back to Antioch. That's where they started out on the trip. And it says they had been committed in Antioch to the grace of God for the work that had now been completed, and on arrival there, they gathered the church together and reported all that God had done through them and how he had opened the door of faith to the Gentiles. And they stayed there for a long time with the disciples. In Proverbs 25:25, the writer says, like cold water is to a weary soul, so is good news from a distant land. And so I hope to share with you some good news today. La Palma is the name of the town. El Salvador is the country. El Salvador is Spanish for the Savior. And so what a great name for a country, the Savior. And the people from their historical beginnings are a very religious people, and they are very open to good news about Jesus. Here is San Salvador. The little circle is around the country. El Salvador is the smallest of the countries in Central America. And yet, while it's the smallest, it's the most densely populated. There are almost 7 million people in that little geographical area. And we were right up on the north edge of the country. Here's the whole country. And we were up on the very north edge of it next to Honduras. And the work that's been done in El Salvador has actually spilled over into Honduras. And so there's sort of a fellowship between the churches there in Honduras and the ones that now are there in the area of La Palma. We found it to be a safe country. They've had troubles in the past, but things have gotten better. They've got a new president, and we were able to travel in security, and we felt good the whole time we were there. They used the U.S. dollar, so we didn't have to exchange any money. Everything was just like we were spending money right back here at home. The city park, there is La Palma, and it's beautiful, very colorful, small town, and we were really enjoying the scenery. It's mountainous. I only saw one flat piece of land on this trip up into the mountains, and it was there in La Palma, and we coveted that land because they need a new school and they need some property for that school. And I just thought, wow, if we could get our hands on that, that would be wonderful. The work there was done during our week in the park, a lot of it, and we had the children from the Christian school there, and some of our group played soccer with the kids, and we played games and did a lot of things like that. Here is looking over one of the rooftops there in La Palma, and you can see the mountain range in the back. There is an artist who has become world famous who spent his time there in La Palma perfecting his style of art. His name is Fernando Yort, and his colorful paintings adorn many of the buildings, and it has spread throughout the country, and as I said, throughout the whole world. So it's beautiful. It's a very beautiful place. Up in the mountains, it was never very hot, and it did rain because we were there during the rainy season, but we did very well adjusting there. Here's one of the narrow streets, and you can see the mountains beyond. Now, we stayed in the hotel where I know the Longs have stayed many times. They've been down there on many trips. This was our first trip for Vicki and I, but it's the Hotel La Palma, and it was comfortable. It was not quite Motel 6. I would say it was either a Motel 4 or 5. But we were able to take lukewarm showers in the morning and get clean, and we were able to be well-fed. They were so hospitable and so nice and so kind and accommodating to us, and they fed us a wonderful breakfast and a wonderful dinner every day, and then we got our lunch out elsewhere. In fact, they hung hammocks out in front of all of our rooms, and so we could relax in the evening, and that became a real social place where we would sit and visit later in the day. The place was, I like gardening and flowers, and it was just amazing seeing all the tropical plants that grew so beautifully down there. Now, our transportation, we didn't have our own vehicles, but we did have 2 pickups available for 24 of us, and that was good. So we divided our group into 2 halves, and that was the women's pickup. And then we had the men's truck, and we learned pretty quickly how to get around like this. I hadn't been able to ride in the back of a pickup since I was a kid, and it's still just as much fun. They have bars up at the front by the cab, and the front row holds onto the bars, and then everybody behind them stands up and holds onto the person in front of you, and you try to make it around the corners without falling out. We did really well traveling around like that, and that's the way everybody travels down in that part of the world. We spent quite a bit of time at the La Palma Christian School. The school there is the premier school in the village of La Palma. They have federal schools that are there, but the thing that this school offers that none of the others do, they offer a computer lab, and a lot of the parents in the community are anxious for their kids to learn technology. They offer classes in English, which, again, is a very important resource to have in that part of the world, so they're learning English. And then they have the Bible, and parents there value religious education, and they want their children to know about God. And so these classes, these 3 classes especially, have made that school the premier sought-after school there in the community of La Palma. They have over 200 students in this school. The teachers there are Christians, and they all have their teaching certification. And so it is a wonderful school. They've reached their capacity, and so something's going to have to be done to expand the school. Here are some of the kids out in the concourse in front of the school, and the girls wear these brown plaid skirts. They all have their uniforms, and they are so polite, and they are so patient. Now, one thing that's different in that part of the world is sermon length. Each sermon that we heard was about 3 times what Tony's length usually is. And so during that time, they sort of had their version of Little Lambs, and our ladies went and taught the children's class. And Vicki said she couldn't believe how long the sermons went and that they had to be with the kids. But she said the kids were so patient and so good and so sweet and kind, and they just have a greater tolerance length than most American kids of that age do. Now, the preacher at the church there in La Palma is Yemi, and this is his wife, Marta. I'm sorry, he's not the preacher, he's the administrator of the school. And he has done wonders in building attendance up. In fact, he's done too good a job. As I said, they are at capacity. They can't take more students, and they just go up through the 8th grade. So we're wanting to help them in some way get a place where they can build a larger facility. This is one of the classrooms, and the kids are just like kids here, and they're excited to learn, and they have a good time. Here they are all lined up in front of school. And here are the teachers. This is the staff and the administration there of the school. the church building is actually part of the school campus. It's the metal roof in the back, and it's a large auditorium, and the school can use it during the week, and then the church meets there in the evenings. This is the preacher, Kelvin, and his wife, Gabby, and one of their sons, Evan, and then not pictured is Gabriel. And they are a young family, and they are doing an outstanding job in that church there in La Palma. Here is the interior of the building. They use PowerPoint there, and it's an exciting place to be. Their singing is wonderful, and the preaching is strong. Here is the other congregation. They planted this church in San Ignacio, and that's just about 5 miles down the road, further up into the mountains from La Palma. And it's interesting because the preacher here was one of the original ones who came to work with the church in that area. In fact, the 2 men that came to begin preaching are still working there in La Palma, in this area. So there's longevity, and that always is such a plus when you have men on the ground for that length of time. Here is the inside, and we were listening to that was during the singing, but we listened to a sermon. Here is the minister, Jesus Hernandez, and he preaches for the San Ignacio Church of Christ. And wouldn't it be wonderful if you could say your preacher is Jesus? So here is Jesus, as they call him. And there is another congregation that has been planted even further down the road in Citala, and Marcus Fuentes and his wife Bessie are there. Marcus is a young man and an outstanding speaker, and that church is really growing well as well. Here's one of the recent baptisms. Now, the medical missions, and this is the part that we're going to get to be involved in. The medical missions have been going on since 2005, and how many trips have you made, Marcy, to down there? She can't even count them. There's so many. She has gone down there and led medical missions, and the medical missions, they go up in the mountains. There is health care. It's provided by the government, but it is not very timely. If you need an operation, you have to wait a long time. They don't always have medicines in store for the people. And so what our group does is they go up into inaccessible areas with people who can't always get down to the cities to get what they need. And there are no operations, no major surgeries, but it's basic health care that's provided and medicines that are useful to help people in these communities. Here's one of the typical medical teams that works there. These teams are made up of medical professionals, and we have a number of medical professionals here. Dick Clay, who works in audiology, has gone down there, and he has a whole box full of used hearing aids that he's hoping to be able to take down there with batteries and help people with their hearing. We've got other medical professionals here, and one of the things that will be needed, but not in large numbers, we will need some helpers. Maybe you have never been involved in medicine as a profession, but you can be an assistant to some medical professionals. So there'll be a little bit of room for some extras like that, but we're mainly looking for medical professionals, and we're looking for translators who are really good in both Spanish and English, and who can be proficient in using medical terminology, because that's a very specific kind of language that needs to be used, and you want to be sure you get the words right when you're dealing with people who have sicknesses and need medicine. So we're going to be needing some translators in that way. Here's a line of them getting the medicines ready. We spent one evening while we were there helping get vitamins ready for children. The foods they eat are not always as nutritious as they need to be, and we had some little generic Fred Flintstone vitamins that we were packaging up to distribute to the children there in the church. Here they are, again, taking care of the medicines. Here they are checking in some of the patients in one of the clinics up higher in the mountains. These are the needs. We're going to need doctors, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants, nurses, paramedics, other health professionals, these interpreters that I spoke of that must be fluent, and then we're going to need some non-medically trained helpers to go along. We're also going to need to purchase some medicines to take with us down there, and so we'll need some contributions for that. We'll need many prayers for success of getting all the licensing approval process done for all of this. And there's some red tape, and we just pray, and the Lord usually opens doors and provides. And then we, most importantly, need to pray for hearts that are open. The preachers go up on the medical campaigns, and while the people are waiting in sometimes long lines, they are doing Bible studies and preaching and teaching, and this is a tremendous way to touch the hearts of the people. And when they see the churches in the area, the church in San Ignacio and La Palma and elsewhere and over in Honduras even, that they have warm feelings about a people who care. And of course, Jesus, he had his healing ministry, and then he shared with the people the truths about the kingdom of God. And so this is a way to replicate that. There are flyers on the doors. We are going to have a meeting at 6 o'clock this coming Wednesday. That's an hour before church starts. And Marcy is going to be the key person there who will be able to answer any questions that you have and talk to you about costs and the expectations of the trip. We've received the green light from the elders, and the trip is being planned in March. That's the dry season down there, and up in the mountains you need dry roads as you're making your way up into the hills. So we're going to be there in March with our very first medical mission campaign from Brookline, and that's going to sort of be the responsibility handed to us. There are other churches involved. Some of them help with the preachers' salaries. Some of them help with the school. But our prime responsibility is going to be medical mission campaigns, and so we'll go down there and just take our own group and be traveling up into the mountains. I just want to tell you how this all started, because this is an amazing thing. Some of you may think, well, I could never do something like that, or I'm too old to do something like that. Vicki and I are both 70, and we'll have to admit, it was a little bit rough. It's been a long time since I've ridden in the back of a pickup, but we did it, and I'll probably go again. But you can go down there and make a huge difference. There were two men back in 2004, and the churches down in the Monette area were looking for Hispanic ministers because a large Hispanic population was coming into that part of the country. And one of the ministers down there was from El Salvador, and he was from up in the mountains. And he kept saying to them, you guys have got to go to El Salvador, and you've got to see the need down there. And finally, these two men went. Ralph McClurg, some of you know Ralph, he's an elder at Mount Vernon, and also Donnie Ellis, who is an elder at Monette. Donnie Ellis is our Marcy's father. That's why she's been down there so many times. Those two guys went down there, and they had never been trained as missionaries. I don't think, had ever read a book about missions and missionary principles and ideas. They went down there, and there's a school of preaching in the capital city of San Salvador, and they talked to the director of the school, and he said, well, we've got a couple of guys that might be willing to go. And they said, well, how much does their support cost? $250 a month. That's what they could live on back in 2004. And so these two fellas from here in Missouri said, well, we can probably get that money together. And so they all went up, and they began the work there. Those two men that graduated from that preaching school are the ones that have been there ever since. They're still there, and they're looked to with tremendous respect by that whole community of Christians in all those churches. They have used curriculum from the Sunset School of Preaching. It's in Spanish, and they have trained preachers. And as they've planted all these new churches, both on the El Salvadorian side and also on the Honduras side, they have populated these churches with trained preachers, all their own people, and it is just tremendous. They have a Christian school that is already at capacity. They can train more preachers, they can plant more churches, and they're doing this, and I just couldn't believe it. That's 18 years, and they've done all this. And I know missionaries who have their doctorate in missiology who hadn't even begun to do that. I mean, all it took was two men who had a heart for the people, and they fell in love with those people and had a heart for the Lord and wanted to share what they could with these people. And all this has happened as a result. And I'm thrilled that we are going to get to step into it at this late stage in the game, but there is still so much to be done, and that we can have a tiny part in experiencing what Marcy and her family have been involved in for these full 18 years. Now, the people there are so poor that they could never build a church building. In a lifetime, they could never do that. The wages for a laborer in El Salvador is $1 an hour. If you work in the area of services or in commerce, you get paid $1.50 an hour. And they live at subsistence level. We went in the homes of the Christians, and they are unbelievably substandard compared to the way we live. And so they can't do this. And I know some people say, well, you know, it's not good to throw American money down to those people in those countries. But I would argue with that. First of all, it's not American money, and it's not Salvadorian money. It all is the Lord's money. And Scripture is very clear about our responsibilities in these areas. In 1 John 3:17, John wrote, if anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? The Monette Church makes little children's dresses, and they send those dresses down every year with the team. And you can't believe how excited those little girls are to get new dresses. And so we do want to help these people, and we do want to bless them. But most importantly, we want to see the gospel of Jesus Christ grow in this area. To help the children go to school, you can sponsor a child for $25 a month in this school. When they finish the 8th grade and then go on through high school, some of the ones who've been going down there have known these children, have developed personal relations with them as they've gone through school. And to go to the University of El Salvador down in the capital city, it costs, the tuition is $1,500 a year. In 4 years, you can get your degree. And to be able to do that, to learn English, to have a degree down there, it changes people's lives. Some of those have come back. They're teachers in the school. They live in the community. And it is wonderful to see them now having the ability to bless their fellow countrymen through the blessings that they have received. This morning, we just want to say, if you're interested, I hope we can find a place for you. Every one of us can help financially, and I want to be transparent. The elders' policy here at Brookline always is absolute transparency. The money we have budgeted for this work in our current missions budget is $5,000. Now, we raise our own money to go down there, and we're going to have some ways to help some of you go that we will be able to get these funds put together. But we don't have a lot. Now, my dream is to see our missions budget grow by leaps and bounds, and I'd love to be able to see this mission work grow by leaps and bounds. And so that's my prayer, and this is just a little beginning today, and I really anticipate that we will see that. This is Marcy's love. She's been part of this, and the people down there love her. They come up and hug her, and they can't wait to see her. And after you've been there once or twice, they'll be the same way with you. We have a sign outside on the parking lot, and we've all gotten so used to seeing it, we probably don't pay any attention to it. It says, you're now entering the mission field. And I want to just challenge us as God's people here at Brookline. You know what the number one way here in the United States that people come to know the Lord, that are brought to the Lord, that are baptized? You know the number one way? It's personal invitation. More people become Christians because someone cared enough to say, would you guys come to church with us on Sunday? And they come, and they meet wonderful Christian people, and they're treated with love, and they hear Tony preach a great lesson, and eventually that leads to a Bible study, and they're baptized. So I don't want us to only think of faraway places. We have opportunities right around us, right here in this part of the world, to invite people to church, and that is the most effective thing you can do evangelistically. The first prayer that's recorded of the early church, it's in Acts chapter 4, verse 23. And the first recorded prayer of the church, it's not guard, guide, and direct us until we gather again. The first prayer is enable us to speak with boldness. And I pray that we can do that both here and in opportunities like the work there in El Salvador. This morning we're going to sing a song, and if you have a need, we want to invite you to let that need be known while we stand and sing.
There's a call come ringing on